In this programme, we visit two successful schools to look at the similarities and differences in their approach to funding ICT. To put this into context, we'll be taken on a guided tour of each school to gain an insight into their current ICT resources and how they're being used. The first school is Waldegrave School for Girls in the London Borough of Richmond, whose approach to funding is mainly government-sourced.
Morning. Welcome to Waldegrave School. I'm Jenny Michelle, Deputy Head, and I have an oversight of IT here. I'm not the coordinator of IT. So I'd like to show you around some of the features that we have. We're not particularly well equipped, but we're trying to use things imaginatively. So to show you some of the areas that we've been developing.
The second school is Greenswood College in Essex, where they've taken an enterprising approach to funding.
Hi, welcome to Greenswood College. My name's Mike O'Sullivan and I'm the Vice Principal. We're going to take you on a tour to see how ICT is used in the school.
ICT is fundamental to Greenswood College, and it's based on a number of core principles and values we have for the students here.
ICT is absolutely critical in our school now, both in terms of teaching, learning and administration in the school. We are learning, I think, to use ICT as another tool in terms of teaching and raising achievement of our pupils.
Young people nowadays are MTV kids. They have got mobiles, they've got PDAs, they've got computers. They're used to sound, music, action. So it's a way of engaging.
We try and identify the things that we want to target, how we're going to fund that and what our success criteria will be.
The building is actually in 3 stages, and some of our problems have been because we're living in a building which was designed well before computers.
We're a truly comprehensive school and we use ICT quite innovatively. We every year undertake a comprehensive curriculum review. We look at what's required at each key stage 3, 4 and 5. And as a result of that, we put together what we call our ICT strategy. And that will identify all the hardware that we need. It will identify what softwares that we need. It will identify any upgrades.
We've commissioned what we've called a health check, a sort of audit health check, really on our hardware and our network support. Because what we want to know is whether we've got the right kit, whether it's sort of wired up correctly, ready to move forward to the next phase, whether we've got enough support staff with the right technical expertise.
Like every other school, our needs are far outweigh the money that we have to buy them, so we then have to prioritise.
One of the problems that most people in my position will find, I'm sure, is that they are working in one school and they're not quite sure how they measure up against other schools, not just locally but nationally.
Right, we're going into a science lab where we are going to use some data loggers to look at a very simple experiment to see if some different liquids have the same boiling points. Some of the equipment that we're using is data loggers, which have been funded for the science department by a grant from the Wolfson Foundation. We received £21,000 from them, and the grant was match funded by the governors, which meant that the science department had about £40,000 invested into it a few years ago. At the college, every teacher obtains a laptop, and that's funded by CVAS, which is the Virtual Education Action Zone, and the school receives a grant every year, and so we put that grant together, and every 3 years we replace these laptops. And then as part of the package, each teacher has a laptop and access to a data projector.
Okay, so we're going to look in one of our larger classrooms, which actually doesn't have any children in it right now. Now, this is a big classroom, and even if we wanted to put a cluster of computers in here, it wouldn't be big enough. So our strategy is to try and have portable equipment, because particularly in maths, they don't need a computer for the whole lesson often. They might just want to use it for, say, 20 minutes. All the maths rooms have got an interactive whiteboard. They've been funded by the London Challenge.
7 came out.
When we're looking at the ICT budget for the whole of the financial year, we do break it down into various headings. One is for the admin system, which pays for the licences and the hardware, primarily for the administration, so it's not really to do with teaching and learning. Then we will have another fund which we call the ICT department.
The way that we calculate the amount that we require to spend on ICT is that our network manager will put in a bid every year, as all heads of department do in line with the college's policy. And we look at that bid and we look at in holistic terms how much money have we got globally to spend on the school, and of course ICT will form a part of that.
Obviously there are some fixed costs. Every year we have to pay for certain things like licences for the school's information management systems that we use. So there's fixed fees that really don't vary very much from year to year. Because we don't have a huge amount of technician support in-house, like many schools, we buy in to someone else. So that's another few thousand fixed costs.
The way that we go about costing our upgrades and cost of repairs is that we have historical costs for that, and so we can tend to roll that forward. But again, because we have our in-house expertise, a lot of the problems that crop up, the hidden costs, if you like, that you can't budget for when servers crash or for whatever reason computers die, which they tend to do, then the in-house team can repair those.
When we're looking at best value for money from tenders, obviously what we would do would draw a specification so that we give each company exactly the same specification, say 25 PCs, installation licences and the spec of the PCs. So we'd get them in, we'd put them in some sort of grid, and we'd look first of all whether they'd fulfilled the spec, and some of them ruled themselves out instantly.
Well, the way we went about introducing, for example, our teacher training room was we put out 3 or 4 tenders.
This is a room which we adapted around about 2 years ago, which was funded through the training school status.
We don't always go with the lowest price because quite often there's a conflict between the price and the quality. And in that instance, we in fact didn't go for the lowest price one. We went for one which was sort of in the mid-range.
What we can do is remotely observe this lesson using this room here, which is our teacher training room. The benefit of this room is that I can observe a trainee teacher teaching a lesson normally, and the students aren't aware perhaps that I'm observing the lesson, then the lesson itself is more natural.
In the funding of ICT within this school, the first will be to reduce the total cost of ownership by between 40 and 60%. We want to do that to enable an expansion of the use of technology. That might sound quite a contradiction, but we realise that we can't take any further percentage out of our main school budget to fund ICT. That's helped us to be more entrepreneurial. We moved very early on into leasing, and we've increased those leases over the years, and we've probably reached the end of the level we can get to. The reason we did the leasing was because we want to accelerate the programme.
We have not gone down the leasing route because we've found that it would tie up future resources that up until this year we were not confident we would have. This year is the first time we've had a 3-year budget, so we can make more confident arrangements over 3 years. The main sources of funding in this school are, first of all, our devolved budget, which pays for everything, and that's just under £4 million. The majority of that, in fact nearly 80%, goes on salaries, which leaves very little to fund all the other things. And the 2 largest budgets outside of salaries are building, maintaining the fabric of the building, and ICT.
The main source of funding into this school are, of course, the government grants. This year, Grant 31 will be very extensive. It will look at the broadband provision, it will look at hardware provision, it will look at software provision through the e-learning credits.
We have standards funds. Less and less they are ring-fenced, but we dedicate quite a lot of the standards fund to buying ICT equipment, and of course we had a lot of New Opportunities Fund money for a couple of years for training. That's now dried up. We had a laptops for teachers, which was another source of ICT funding, and because we're both a science college and a leading edge partnership, we get additional funding from the DFES, and we've invested heavily from those sources. That comes to about 200,000 a year.
This is coming into our learning resources area. This was part of the new build, originally designed as a library, but obviously things have moved on. Originally we had 15 PCs, like one of the rooms you've seen downstairs, so that the girls always had to work in pairs. That's not ideal, so we did that 1 year, and then out of our next year's school budget we increased it so that we've now got 30, so they can all work individually, which obviously is much more satisfactory, and put in the projector. We've sort of been building up gradually. We tend not to sort of put all our eggs in one basket.
Where we're going to now is our Lifelong Learning Centre, which I suppose a lot of schools would call their library. But what we've decided to do is use this in the community as well as in school, and it's open to the public in the evening and at weekends. There are normally a couple of classes going on in here. But this is an interesting one because this is in fact a converted gym. Our own site staff converted it about 4 years ago from a gym into a library, and the money that we saved we used to purchase the ICT equipment which is in here.
Funding's always been a challenge to us. Delivery of the actual services via the network is always a major challenge. As the ICT grows within a school, so the technical support, the technical knowledge, the number of file servers, the local area network, the maintenance of the computer grows alongside, and the costs sometimes outstrip the income that we actually have.
There has been a lot of money invested in ICT by the government, there's no doubt about that, and in training for teachers to use ICT. One of the problems has been that that funding frequently dries up. It's available for a year or 2 years, and then the money is diverted into some other area. So it's very difficult under those circumstances to plan for continually upskilling the staff and replacing the equipment to the highest standard.
The college has been very entrepreneurial at extracting money from unusual sources. For example, we've had a grant of around about £21,000 from the Wolfson Foundation for the use of ICT in science, and we managed to extract £5,000 from the Ford Educational Foundation. Now, because we're a member of the Virtual Education Action Zone, the South East Virtual Education Action Zone, that was match funded. So the money from Ford's and the money from Wolfson was in fact increased. So we had £40,000 going in from the Wolfson bid, and we also had £15,000 going in from Ford's. In fact, not a lot of people know that foundations give away the equivalent of £1 billion a year in funding.
Our entrepreneurial approach to generating income, fundraising, resourcing the ICT includes this team of people, the e-learning manager, the vice principal in charge of curriculum. Everybody is celebrated and rewarded for bringing that knowledge to the table, and without that knowledge we get left behind.
We do have plans to expand our ICT buildings. We're going to put an extra room in the corner of a courtyard which will be for ICT, and the money for that has come from our specialist schools bid.
We have 10 world-class outcomes. One of those is to ensure that the children are ICT proficient, that they have industry standard qualifications. They can move into the 21st century with confidence in their ability.
I think my advice to any head or school that's looking to spend wisely is to get the best advice that you can before you set off on a route that you can't pull back from, and to look at other schools, not just schools locally or similar schools, but the best schools.
We learn more from working with other schools probably than any other source. Looking at the innovation that some head teachers, some ICT managers are implementing in their schools, and we're constantly scanning reports from around the world.